Yesterday I watched the movie Napoleon and was totally disappointed. Friends, what a waste of resources and what a poor line of story. I know many of you probably have already watched it or probably watch it because it's all the way everywhere. Everybody's talking about it. I don't think Napoleon movie is worth watching. And it's not because an Englishman made a movie about French Napoleon where the director made Josephine as the core of the movie, or Napoleon portrayed starting as an alpha guy and turning into a juvenile, whiny, petty character after meeting Josephine. But it's because it misses the entire point of Napoleon's mission in life, his biblical mission. And in nowhere I read about Napoleon's true mission, not even in Rotten Tomatoes criticism or any other criticism about the movie, but only in the book called War and the Bible by St. Nicholas of Serbia. It's a great book. I highly recommend reading. Now listen how St. Nicholas describes the life of Napoleon and his divine mission and what God did to him and through him to European nations, and how this movie, in my opinion, should have been made, especially if you spend $200 million on that. So please listen carefully. If you love true history, you will probably not hear this angle elsewhere in any other criticism of the movie Napoleon. This is how it should be made. The last king of France did evil in the sight of the Lord. Even if they called themselves Christian kings and held onto the traditions of the faith, their hearts stood far from the Lord, and their deeds were not in line with the law of God. Due to this, God allowed calamity to befall them. This is because God could no longer listen to the usual cold prayers of the French kings or watch their arrogance, which came from power and wealth. And a revolution broke out against the final mighty king of France, Louis XVI. The king and his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette, died as a result of the revolution. By the way, movie starts from Marie Antoinette's execution. Then the revolutionaries began to create a new order in France. Along with this, they forgot their Lord God. They neither called upon him nor mentioned him in their work. Rather, they mocked the name of the Lord and renounced him as if he did not exist. In the place of the one and living God, they made an idol in the image of a naked woman and called this idol the goddess of reason, and carried it through the city, dancing and singing around it. This was done by people baptized in the Christian faith. And look what God did. The Lord was moved to anger by their deeds and took from them their mind, which was given only by him. Then these revolutionaries became confused and began to fight for power and started killing each other. And you can see this in the movie Napoleon. Human blood colored all the lands of France, and executioners did not cease killing people for years. All of the acts of the revolutionaries were led by malice and revenge, it is madness. After more than a year of such madness, the French people, in their distress, cried out to the Lord. And look how God responded. The Lord heard and raised up a man from an unknown line and name, Bonaparte. From one island in the Great Sea, Bonaparte stopped the revolution, calmed the land, and reigned on the thrones of all French kings. Since the rest of the rulers and courts of Europe of the time did evil in the sight of the Lord called upon Napoleon Bonaparte to punish the rulers and nobles throughout Europe, as he once called upon the pagan king Nebuchadnezzar to punish Israel when they apostatized from God. And Emperor Napoleon went forth against the European kings and waged many wars against them, and he defeated them wherever he met them, for God wanted to execute chastisement upon the European rulers and their courts and nobles because of their exceeding lawlessness. Only against the Serbian Montenegrins was the army of this mighty king powerless. Why? All the attempts of Napoleon's army to subjugate Montenegro and expand further into the Balkans and then even further into the Great East remained fruitless. For God protected Montenegro because the Serbian Montenegrins and their ruler Peter I, a righteous man of God, did what was right before the Lord. In his power and glory, Napoleon became proud beyond all measure. In his pridefulness, he began to see himself as the God of the earth and to view all people with contempt as weapons in his hands, and used them for his own personal ambitious goals. In his arrogance, Emperor Napoleon attacked Russia with his enormous army, the likes of which Europe had not seen since ancient times. In Russia, at that time, Tsar Alexander ruled, who for the most part did what was right before the Lord, although his heart was not entirely directed to the Lord. Among the nobles, including those nearest to him, there was much sin, which entered into the rest of the nation. It was due to the sins of the Russians, not due to Napoleon's destructive forces, that he was allowed to enter the Russian land and subjugate it all the way to Moscow. This success all the more inflated the arrogance of Emperor Napoleon, and he fully forgot his debt to the Lord of armies. The Russian people, in their poverty and affliction, repented of all their sins, and together with their Tsar and nobles cried out to God for help and salvation. At that time, there was a commander of the Russian army, Kutuzov, who was a humble man, quiet and God-fearing. He did not set hope in numbers or in weapons, but in the one living God. While the know-nothings called him a know-nothing, Kutuzov was silent and prayed to God. When Moscow was set on fire, an indescribable fear fell over the army of the French emperor, and the frightened emperor fled alone with his coachman. His army was crushed, and the Russian land was fully liberated and cleansed of invaders. Since the proud Emperor Napoleon failed to grasp from where and from whom this defeat came, and neither humbled himself before the Lord nor tempered his pride, the anger of God against him was not quenched, but chased him further. Emperor Napoleon was defeated in the final battle, captured, and taken as a prisoner to an island of despair in the Great Sea. And this is where the really interesting things happen. 7 years Napoleon spent on that island in despair, until gradually his pride was calmed and his heart softened. Emperor Napoleon lived 7 years in captivity, humiliation, and abasement on the deserted island of St. Helena. Then Napoleon began, in humility and adoration, to speak about the Lord Christ. A significant parallel. The arrogant king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, was exiled from people for 7 years until he became meek and recognized the power of the one true God, and that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whom he wishes. That was a quote from the book of Daniel. Contemplating much about everything that occurred to him, the meek and already humbled great Napoleon wrote these words, quote, "I know man, and I tell you that Jesus Christ is not a man. His religion is a mystery, which comes from the knowing of man, but such knowing which cannot be called human knowledge. Jesus came into the world to reveal the mysteries of heaven and the laws of the Spirit. Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and myself founded empires, but upon what did we rest the creations of our genius? Upon force. Jesus Christ alone founded his empire upon love. And at this hour, millions of men would die for him. I die before my time, and my dead body too must return to the earth to become food for worms. Behold the destiny near at hand of him who has been called the great Napoleon. What an abyss between my deep misery and the eternal reign of Christ, which is proclaimed, loved, adored, and which is extending over all the earth. And no other evil befell him until his death. For the Lord spared Napoleon from any other evils because he had executed his chastisement upon Europe, and he had expelled arrogance from his heart. And Napoleon died peacefully. You see, dear friends, this is how this movie should have been made, because this is the conclusion of his life. This is how he was thinking at the end of his life. Especially if you're Christian or God-fearing people, you look at the story in the light of Bible, you will see exactly this way. Imagine if $200 million was spent on a movie, 2023 movie, Napoleon, and this type of story was made as a movie. How many people will change their lives? How many people would have changed the ways they think and the ways they live this life? Millions of people are going to watch this movie. Imagine how many lives would have been transformed. This is how this movie about Napoleon should have been made. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this story, please give it a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. Although I make stories and news about cars, but this is about Napoleon because I know a lot of people from you guys who follow Torque News YouTube channel will watch this. God bless you, and I'll see you soon in our next report. I'll look forward to your comments.